Direct from the Six, world-renowned, Canada's largest city, with Canada's biggest thinkers, visionaries, and hustlers. This is Startup Talk, featuring the founders, funders, innovators, and community leaders who've led Canada's startup ecosystem right here in Toronto. You'll hear the challenges, the failures, the successes. Toronto's Startup Podcast gives you the full story direct from the entrepreneurs and influencers who've made a difference. Now, the host of Startup Talk, the founder of TorontoStarts, the Startup Coach.
Can you walk us through the tension alignment framework and how entrepreneurs can apply it to identify and resolve growth barriers in their business?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest tension we all experience, and obviously there's all kinds of tensions at play in every marketplace, right? But the biggest tension I look at is the tension between what we want to do and what the industry expects from us. So, I'll give you a great example. I recently was talking to an entrepreneur who is selling ransomware and threat protection software. It's a SaaS solution to small and medium businesses. Great example, because who wants to buy ransomware, right? We all believe that's not going to happen to us. We all believe that, especially for small and medium businesses. And so what happens in this situation is you resort to fear mongering, and then that pushes the prospect away even more. Yeah, like selling life insurance to somebody, right? Or you try to tell them about all the features, benefits, and you give them some kind of ROI calculation, and that doesn't work either, right? And so what do you do in a situation like that? One of the first things you do is you take a step back and you go, okay, what is the inherent tension here? The tension is the world expects that they wouldn't need this solution. That's what the world expects. The world doesn't want anti-ransomware solution. Their expectation is, I don't need any of this stuff, right? And your desire is, I want every company to have this stuff because I want to protect them. Okay, so now that you've realized this, now you got to figure out, okay, if the world doesn't want to, or doesn't need any of this stuff, how do you make them need it? So what do they need, right? And so turns out what they need, for example, is to be able to track the efficiency of their network, for example, or they might need other peripheral services like ways to track the security of their network when people are on their mobile devices and things like that. And so you might realize that actually the solution you need to sell has to be packaged in part of a larger solution that's doing something else for the customer. So until you look at the tension between expectations and desires in terms of your industry, I'm not talking about, our internal, the stuff we do on the therapy couch. I'm talking about what the industry expects from our product versus what we want our product to do. Until you do that, you don't give yourself that important dose of reality check. The moment you get the reality check, you realize, okay, we cannot win by pushing water uphill. What we have to figure out is how to fit our product into the expectation of the customer, at least initially. And then later we can change that expectation. But initially, we have to. There's no other way to win.
And it sounds like, these are the exact techniques that Santi was asking about. How do you go from looking for clients to clients looking for you?
Yeah, fantastic question. And, we did this when we were building Motive Base. This is what we did. Everything was inbound. And the way we did it was, I'm not going to talk about content strategy here. There's lots of gurus that talk about content strategy. For me, the point is, the moment you do this expectation mapping exercise, you have tons to write about. So, for example, in our industry, we knew that clients' expectations were charts and graphs. People love seeing a chart and a graph that says, 22% of millennials care about this. But as anthropologists, we wanted them to ask, what do these people believe? And that's pushing water uphill. We can't get them to do that in 2015. By 22, they were doing that. But in 2015, they weren't doing that. So how do we solve that problem? We solve that problem by figuring out, okay, step one, how do we fit our solution into the charts and graphs? So the first thing we did was we actually sought inspiration, because my little one at that point had These kids books where you can pull tabs or you open, it's like Where's Waldo, open stuff and you get new layers of information. So we use that as inspiration. And so behind the graphs and charts were layers of belief and value-based information that came from our IP. And so we packaged it up in that way, which meant we had tons to talk about. So our entire content strategy revolved around peeling the layers. So that's what we call it, peeling the layers. So all we did was talk about the layers behind the statistics you see. And it got so much attention, so as CTOs would reach out to us and we'd acquire new customers. I remember this one time we acquired ConAgra Foods as a customer. In a matter of 2 weeks, she signed a $350,000 deal. And that had never happened in the history of our business at that point. And it happened just because we didn't know this, but she had been reading our content for a year about peeling the layers behind the common statistics you see. So my point is, how do you go from looking for clients to clients looking for you? You have to figure out what is your version of peeling the layers, right? So do the expectation mapping exercise and then figure out what is your unique story that allows you to basically talk about this stuff to no end and gives you a unique voice. It's really important.
Where do people go to find out more?
You can go to Investment Arc, but ARC is spelled with a K, so investmentark.net. That's my investment company. So if you're a startup and you need some assistance, that's where to find me. And then, of course, my newsletter, Decision Lab. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. Please don't hesitate to connect with me. And again, Craig will have a link to my LinkedIn profile as well.
Yeah, and all that'll be there. And I'll throw a link to the newsletter in the chat on LinkedIn. I see a couple of people asking it in an hour or so after the podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you all for the great questions. And thank you for the great interview.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been Startup Talk, Toronto's startup podcast. For more exclusive content, the episode vault, and to be part of Toronto's Starts community, visit TorontoStarts.com. Get your name on the newsletter mailing list and check out our upcoming events. For more episodes, subscribe now. And please recognize the time and work behind the scenes put into connecting you with the biggest visionaries, entrepreneurs, and innovators in Toronto by leaving a 5-star review. Join us for more next episode from Toronto's most active entrepreneur and startup community on Startup Talk.